If you were to look at Frank Horvat's Virtual Zoo photo book with no context of him as an artist, you would likely believe that he was a more contemporary photographer, that he was maybe born in the 80s, as this book came out in the 90s. Maybe he was born in the 80s or the 70s, and he's very experienced with digital photography and very experienced with Photoshop, because of how seamless his Photoshopping abilities are. However, you'd be wrong because he was born in 1928. Think about that for a second. A man who was born in 1928 has this level of Photoshop abilities during the beta stages of Photoshop being an application. It's absolutely mind-blowing. It's really beautiful. More on his background. Frank Horvat was born in 1928. He was born in a section of Italy that is now Croatia. Being born in 1928 and being born to a Jewish family, his family had to flee Italy to go to Switzerland, where they lived through the duration of the war, of World War II. And yeah, he was able to avoid religious persecution, and him and his family survived World War II by living in Switzerland, a neutral country. And I think while he doesn't discuss it in his work, he makes a distinct artistic choice not to discuss it, not to discuss the war or anything like that. For me, when I was researching him, it was kind of like wait a minute, you're a Jewish man who was living in Italy. How did you avoid this prosecution? And then I found out he was living in Switzerland during that time. But like I said, it's not really discussed anywhere in his work, like on his website or even on autobiographical papers I found written about him. Maybe he discusses it and I just haven't found that writing, but he does make a specific stylistic choice. In his own words, he kept away from pictures of war, disease, and suffering, not out of indifference to these misfortunes, but because I feel neither the moral justification nor the physical courage to face such situations as a photographer. And I think how this displays itself in his work is specifically thinking about displacement. Because he left Italy at a young age, he probably witnessed the rise of fascist Italy, the rise of Mussolini, and his family was able to get out to this neutral, safe ground, to this safe haven, where all you can do is hear about the war that's going on, but maybe you're not witnessing it like you would have been if you were in Italy. And just thinking about how thinking that the place where you grew up now is out to get you. Like, you're no longer an Italian, you are just Jewish. I don't know. And like I said, he doesn't discuss this. This is just me thinking about it. So, after living in Switzerland and after the war, Frank Horvat moves to Paris, where he begins working as a photojournalist. He would continue photojournalism. He would travel around the world as a freelance photojournalist, going to India, going to Pakistan, traveling all through Asia, really, as well as Europe. He would then try his hand at fashion photography, which, if you are to go through his life's work, it is such a wide range of photography. Like, he was really, really obsessed with photography. So yeah, he travels around working for different magazines, doing freelance stuff. He works for Life for a little while. He goes to New York City and takes photos, does a candid series of people on the subway, which to me, when I was looking through the photos, felt very much like that meme, things the European mind can't comprehend. Like, it was just, his photos were like someone street performing, and I was just like, oh, okay. I don't know, it wasn't particularly compelling to me, that series, but I'm sure it was compelling to him and probably other Europeans who have never been to New York. But yes, so in the 80s, his eyesight begins to fail him due to an eye disease, and he does have to stop making photos because he's losing his eyesight. He can't see, which is incredibly tragic. But Horvat doesn't let that stop him. He goes on to interview photographers about their process, about how they treat their models, just asking them all about their work. Just like truly showing how obsessed with photography he is and how much he cares about it. And one thing you'll notice about Frank Horvat is that he is very innovative. He very much has his finger on the pulse. Like, to me, seeing his images from Pakistan was really, really interesting because he went 2 years after Pakistan's creation, after British India was split from British India was split in half, not in half, but like, I don't know, like, was split between India and Pakistan. And 2 years later, still very fresh, he goes and he takes photos, like, as a freelance journalist, and they're very beautiful, very compelling photos. But Frank Horvat, he pioneered a lot of different photographical techniques when he was doing film photography and in fashion photography. He was one of the first people to use 35mm film to take fashion portraits. And he was also one of the first people to remove models from sets and place them on the streets of Paris. And it just reminds me of displacement, removing something from one place and putting it in another place. So to me, like, these ideas they're just very prevalent in his art. And those are the ones that speak the most to me, are the ones where he is dealing with these themes of displacement, even if he's not specifically discussing them. When talking about Virtual Zoo, I found a quote from him off his website that will lead me into discussing the photo book Virtual Zoo. So the quote reads, "Just like everyone else, I have reoccurring dreams, some pleasant and some less pleasant. In the unpleasant ones, I miss trains, I lose my teeth, or I have to crawl through a narrow tunnel. The nightmares of most people and the daily fare of psychoanalysts. My pleasant dreams are less frequent but more original. In them, I meet animals who speak to me, and this gives me a feeling of bliss that can last for hours after my awakening. The idea of the bestiary may have come from there. The animals shown in these images are those that anyone can see in a zoo. But here they are liberated from their cages, from the concrete floors and from the watching eyes of humans, as I would like them to roam in nature, and as I encounter them in my dreams." So not explicitly stating anything about displacement, nothing about like a greater, it's not about, he's not listing some higher message. It's just as he sees it in his dreams, which is quite beautiful. And you can see the dreamlike qualities. A lot of these images feel very surreal, and that's what originally drew me to the book, was kind of not being able to comprehend what was happening in these images. Why do they feel so uncanny? And it's because they're actually two separate images that were photoshopped together. So this elephant is not native to wherever this background is. These are two different images that he photoshopped together. So let's see, where is this elephant now? It's an Asian elephant, but it's in the dunes of France. Let's go back to the Asian elephant in France. Yeah, so there is this just like absolutely wild realism to all of these photos. Some of them get a little more kooky, and if you go to some of his other Photoshop projects, you can definitely tell they're photoshopped. But hey, he was a pioneer of photoshopping and photography. Of course, there's a learning curve. I definitely couldn't do any better, so it's just incredibly impressive to me and very inspiring, very, very inspiring to think about someone born in 1928. I don't know when my grandma was born, but she doesn't even like to use her iPhone. She likes to use her landline because it's easier. So it's just really wild to me.
It's just real.
So a bestiary is a medieval compilation book of sorts. It's a compilation of illustrations that depict animals, real animals, having some type of symbolic qualities. So the example I read online was about a pelican who could like open its chest and like its blood would come out and create its offspring, and that was supposed to be a metaphor for Jesus, which is like super cool, awesome. But he created his own bestiary, and this is just one of several bestiary projects. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to clear that up in case that was a confusing word. And then I wanted to discuss this image here. This to me was a clear indication of Photoshop before I did any further research into figuring out what the process was. There was just something not quite right about the way that he was sitting in here. Just something so bizarre and something so odd about him facing the camera, looking right at the camera. And this his little friend in the background. He's kind of like defending him in a way. And this piece is called Mandrill Rocks of Fontainebleau. So I don't know where a mandrill is from, but I think a fountain. I think the location is France, if I had to guess. And the monkey is maybe from Asia. I don't know. I'm not sure. But to me, this one really stands out. There's a couple where the animals are looking right at the camera, but to me that gaze just really is very striking. And it's still a little unclear to me if he took the photos of the animals and of the backgrounds. I feel like it makes sense that he would take the photos of the background, and maybe the animals were taken images of from a zoo. But again, I'm really not sure, and it doesn't really say anywhere. And since these were images from after his after he was diagnosed with his eye disease, it doesn't really seem like he would be out taking these photos. But since he was a freelance photographer, I'm sure he had hundreds of photos from all around the world, everywhere he traveled to. And he even talks about how when Photoshop came around, how he regretted deleting so many beautiful nature photos because there was like a power line in it or something, because now he had Photoshop and could simply Photoshop the power line out and it wasn't an issue. Yeah, he even gave other photographers a lot of slack for not getting on Photoshop sooner, just because it made their lives so much easier. I am sure, I can't even imagine life without Photoshop. And again, it's just wild that you could master Photoshop like this, like truly like this. I do think an element to why it's so believable is because it's printed out and put in a book form. There's something very like trusting about something being in book form. I've showed a couple of my friends this book, and we spent a long time trying to figure out, like actually debating whether it was real or not, and trying to figure out what he could have done before I did the actual research into figuring out what his process was. But then when I went on his website and looked at some of his other works, to me it was very clear that they were photoshopped. So there's something a little deceiving about the hardcover copy, but that's good. Like, I think that that's lovely. And I think that you should be intrigued and you should want to search deeper into these photos. And I'm sure that's a part of what he wanted. But to discuss this photo over here, this is a very beautiful shot of a yak and a raven in the Pyrenees. And this just brings up so many questions to me. Like, was this yak just rubbing himself on a tree and he happened to capture that moment and then Photoshop the tree in with the yak? Was the crow on the tree? Was he always there? Or is he also, is he from somewhere else too? Were these two, like, are they together? Are they separate? Is the tree with the Pyrenees, or is the tree with the yak? Or, I don't know. I just have so many questions, and there are just so little answers. I've considered, he has this app that you can download where he's got like 10 hours of autobiographical discussions. And I considered listening to some of them to find out more information about the process. But his life was just so intriguing that I just enjoyed researching him on my own and trying to scour for clues. This is the next image here that I want to talk about. It is these beautiful, beautiful monkeys with their beautiful noses. I really, really enjoy the lighting choices for a lot of these. And just as someone who knows Photoshop, I just don't understand how these monkeys are in this beautiful lighting, and you could look twice at it and not realize that it's photoshopped. It's just beautiful. And like again with what I was saying with the yak and the raven, like how much of this here is real? Is this tree from the original location, or is just what he's holding from the original location? I don't know. I don't know. Will anyone ever know? I don't know. This one is some wolves in France. And for some reason this image stands out to me. I think it's because it almost looks like a painting. Something about the background just looks very thick. Like I can like feel the texture, even though it's a photograph, which is very hard. Like for here, I don't really feel this texture. I can tell this is a photo, but something about this just feels like a painting to me. And the wolves just glide so seamlessly in there. They also look like they're just a part of this painting. And I think this one is special because it is in France, which is where Horvat went directly after World War II, and where he lived the rest of his life after traveling around. Sorry. Let's talk about these dang polar bears, huh? Or they're not polar bears, they're just called white bears. White bears on the Aran Islands in Ireland. This one, to me, I don't know if Horvat was thinking about climate change at all, as this was the 90s, 98 specifically. So he might have been. But this one is the most reminiscent to me of, like, iconography about climate change. Polar bears obviously being animals that are directly, the most directly affected by climate change, especially in the 90s, because now everything is affected by climate change. But back then it was just, the glaciers are melting, the ice is melting, the polar bears are dying. This desolate land with this tragic image of the polar bears is just so striking, and seems like something you would see as some kind of climate discussion. Okay, this one is just another strikingly beautiful image to me. There's something so playful about it. Let's see where this is taken. It's these beautiful rams, 11, sheep in Mont de Moras, France. I think there is something to be said about his most beautiful images being in the place where he decides to live out the rest of his life, and the place where he obviously feels at home if he's living in France. The ones that I find the most striking just happen to be the ones in France. To me, this one was also kind of a clear indication of Photoshop, because there's something about the lens that he used for this background image where it almost looks like a fish eye, or maybe it's just a super wide lens, but the rams don't quite fit into that wide lens. They don't quite look like they're from the same world, and yet I want to be there with them. This is so lovely. It's just such a beautiful image. Oh, here's two, like I was talking about with the gaze, here's two that were also kind of obvious to me as Photoshop. just because of this proximity, like how could he be this close, but also have this like beautiful range? I feel like with most wildlife photography, the depth of field would be a bit shallower, so you would get a great shot of these two bald birds, but you would not get this crisp, beautiful background. And then there was just something about, I don't know what this creature is, but the way that it is looking, I just think these two were really funny to put together. What is this creature? Some type of monkey with beautiful green eyes. Saki with baby, Redwood Forest, California. And then the other one is vultures. These are vultures. Oh, awesome. Vultures, where are the vultures? The vultures are in Gourd, Duran, France. Beautiful background once again. And it's in France. Anyways, this book, beautiful photo book, excellent print quality. Horvat is a really interesting character to look into, and I did really enjoy a lot of his work. I would love to learn more about him. Maybe I will listen to his 10 hours of autobiographical content that he has on his app, Horvatland. I don't know. I just really love the idea of discussing displacement. I just really love how he doesn't explicitly state anything. It is all, everything that I enjoy about it is my interpretation. Because he creates these idealized worlds where you don't know what's going on. And I think that's what's really intriguing about him as an artist. And also just the fact that he's so quick on his feet. He was unafraid to try new techniques, unafraid to dabble with Photoshop, really put Photoshop on the map for photographers. I don't know what the holdup was. I don't know why they were not interested in Photoshop, but yeah, just overall a really interesting guy. He did unfortunately die in 2020, so rest in peace. I enjoyed A Virtual Zoo very much, and it's really, really striking when contrasted with his earlier works. So if you're ever interested, you should definitely check out some of his work from the 50s compared to his later works. It's just really impressive. Yeah, that was Frank Horvat Virtual Zoo.